Good evening, my lovelies, and welcome back. This evening, we're checking back in with Dan Rogers and his daughters Sarah and Frank and Teddy. When we last left them, Satan was about to send him home with a helper. Let's see how they're all getting along with Miss Hatchetface now, shall we? So come, lean in closer, and we'll begin. I arrived back home in a rush of smoke, sucking in a deep breath of the clean, fresh air. I had almost forgotten what air smelled like without the overwhelming presence of sulfur. Miss Hatchetface landed next to me, and Frank and Teddy and Sarah landed across the room on the sofa, Sarah still clinging to the back of Frank and Teddy's head and giggling like mad. I took another deep breath of fresh air, and then another, and another. Soon, I realized I was feeling quite a bit dizzy, and the room seemed to be tilting upwards. On second thought, no, I was falling. I felt someone's arms catch me, and looked up to see Miss Hatchetface looking down at me before I felt my feet leave the ground, and I realized that she was carrying me. "Just lay down and relax," she said, placing me on the sofa next to Sarah and Frank and Teddy. "You've had a bit of a shock." I gasped out a reasonable approximation of the word thanks and sank into the overstuffed leather cushions. But my rest was short-lived as I heard a knock at the door. Miss Hatchetface answered it with a bubbly "Hi," but I couldn't see anybody there. Instead, she bent over and picked something up off the ground. "Oh, Mr. Rogers, you've gotten another letter from Satan." She handed the letter to me, and, with a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I opened it. "Dear Dan, your name is Dan, right? I'm really bad with names. I'm just going to assume that it's Dan, and if it's not, next time you're in hell, you can let me know. Anyway, the reason I'm writing isn't to ask your name, but to let you know that I went ahead and took care of your little Frank and Teddy problem. The solution is scheduled to be delivered shortly after this letter. Yours truly, Satan." My stomach sank. I had already had experience with 2 of Satan's solutions before, and I had gotten 2 demonic hellspawn as roommates out of the experience. My suspicions only deepened when a large moving van pulled to a stop in front of my house. What could be inside? I wondered. Was it a giant snake demon? An even larger demon teddy bear? A herd of evil unicorns? I didn't want to know, and since I was still feeling a little woozy, I asked Miss Hatchetface to check for me. She came back hauling a giant wooden crate that must have been 10 times her size and set it outside the front door. "How do we get it in?" she asked me. I slowly shook my head. "Try the garage," I croaked out. "Oh, that's a good idea," she giggled, hauling the crate up as if it were full of feathers. I heard the sound of grinding metal come from the garage, and I quickly found my feet and rushed outside. I saw Miss Hatchetface half squatting, shoving the garage door up with her bare hands. She threw it into the open position and stood grinning with her arms crossed, admiring her handiwork. "Wow, that door was pretty heavy," she said. "Humans must be stronger than I thought." "There's a remote," I replied. "A what?" Never mind." "Okay," she giggled. "We'd better get this crate inside and crack it open." My urge to be a gentleman and help her lift the crate was not quite as powerful as my urge not to get a hernia, so I let her move it in herself. When we had gotten it inside, she grabbed hold of one of the wooden sides and tore it off with such force that it hit the wall behind her and shattered into sawdust and splinters. "Oops," she giggled. Sometimes I don't know my own strength. Hercules is a distant ancestor. Right, I said, too preoccupied with the contents of the box to concentrate on what she had said. Is that what I think it is? I asked. Ooh, it sure is, she replied. Wow, Satan must really like you. These are rare. Inside the box was a tangled mess of black branches and purple leaves. The leaves formed little spirals at the center of which rested a large, orange, pine cone-shaped fruit. Only, it wasn't actually a fruit. It was Cheetos. I reached out and snapped off one of the Cheeto fruits, and a new one instantly sprouted out of the circle of dark purple leaves surrounding the bud. So it's a Cheeto tree? I said. Yep. Well, all right. I turned around to head back inside when I saw Sarah and Frank and Teddy ambling down the sidewalk hand in hand. Well, hand in paw. Hey! I shouted after them, sprinting as I tried to catch up. By the time I managed to get in front of them, I was out of breath and leaning over with my hands on my knees. Where? Giant Teddy! Neighbors! Was all I managed to gasp out. I think he means you should go back inside so that the neighbors don't see you, I heard Miss Hatchetface's voice say from behind me. I nodded my head vigorously in agreement. I cannot abandon my charge to the wild dangers of the suburban neighborhood, Frank and Teddy boomed. I shall accompany her on her quest, no matter the danger, and together we shall go to the park and catch butterflies. They're called butterflies, Sarah giggled. Butterflies. That does not make sense. Are they flies coated in butter? Sarah merely giggled in response. Said Miss Hatchetface. I think it'll be fine if we just get you a disguise first. Let's head back into the house and I'll put one together for you. That is acceptable, said Frank and Teddy. But it must be fearsome. Of course, said Miss Hatchetface. Mr. Rogers, are you okay? I was still too out of breath to answer her and simply gave a thumbs up in response. Right about then, I was really regretting my decision to replace the morning bike rides I used to take with coffee and donuts. Oh, don't worry, Mr. Rogers. I can help you. Miss Hatchetface laughed, lifting me off the ground with ease. When we got back inside, Sarah and Frank and Teddy ran to play upstairs and Miss Hatchetface set me down on the sofa. You just rest a while, she said, smiling down at me. I think I saw something upstairs that would make a really good disguise. Yeah, okay, I replied. I'll be here. Miss Hatchetface's hips swayed as she climbed the staircase. She paused at the top, and I quickly pretended to look elsewhere as she turned to look at me. She laughed and continued on upstairs. What an idiot, I thought to myself. She obviously knew you were checking her out. Who just stares at the wall? I clicked on the TV and dozed off for a bit and woke up to Sarah shaking my shoulders. Daddy, Daddy, look! She squealed. Frank and Teddy had been draped in a giant mess of fabric that did in fact seem to disguise the fact that he was a giant demon teddy bear. The costume, however, was anything but fierce. It was bright pink and covered in a unicorn pattern with lace at the bottom that brushed the floor whenever he moved. Are those Sarah's curtains? I asked. Yeah, Sarah shouted. Cool, right? Is it fearsome? Frank and Teddy boomed. Sure, I replied. I looked pleadingly at Miss Hatchetface. But why did you have to use the curtains? I asked. Miss Hatchetface shrugged. They were the only thing that was big enough, she replied. Okay. May we go to the park now and exterminate the flies of butter? Frank and Teddy asked. We're not going to exterminate them, just catch them, Sarah said. I make no promises. Yes, I said. You can go to the park and catch butterflies, but I'm coming too. Yes, Sarah exclaimed. I am also excited, Frank and Teddy added in. Miss Hatchetface? I asked hopefully. Sure, she replied. Let me grab some Cheeto fruit for Frank and Teddy. You have Cheeto fruit? Oh yes, Satan sent some over, Miss Hatchetface replied. I am exceedingly pleased by this information. Soon, we were all on the way to the park. My trunk crammed to the brim with Cheeto fruit, me trying to keep my eyes off Miss Hatchetface in the passenger seat while Sarah bounced around excitedly in the back seat with Frank and Teddy. When we got to the park, Miss Hatchetface and I sat on a bench and watched Sarah and Teddy play for a while with butterfly nets. So, Mr. Rogers? Miss Hatchetface began, turning those big, glittering black eyes towards me. Is there a Mrs. Rogers in your life at all? My tongue began to feel cumbersome and clumsy, as it always did when Miss Hatchetface looked at me with those eyes. No, not anymore, I managed to choke out. Really? What happened? She passed away shortly after Sarah was born. Oh my, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bring up something so painful. No, it's okay, I said. You didn't know. Let's change the subject, she said, her eyes shifting themselves to the ground. What do you do for a living? I'm a writer, I replied. Oh, really? That's so amazing. I think everybody's wanted to write a book at some point, but most of us never actually do it. Well, in a way, I said. It was my wife's death that inspired me to start writing. Oh, really? How so? Well, stories have structure, I said. There's good guys and bad guys, and, well, when bad things happen, they usually happen for a reason. Like the character is being punished for something bad they did, or something. But in real life, they just happen because they happen. I guess I just wanted a break from real life. I looked up to see Miss Hatchetface's big black eyes had grown moist around the edges. We stared at each other in silence for a moment. Then there was a scream, and the moment was over. We both jumped to our feet and rushed towards Sarah to see her sitting on the ground and crying, while Josh, the neighborhood bully, was pulling the wings off her butterflies and laughing. I saw a pink blur in my peripheral vision, and I realized it was Frank and Teddy as he scooped the boy off the ground by the back of his shirt and began to shout at him in his crackling baritone. You are not permitted to harm the Princess Sarah's flies of butter, he boomed out so loudly that Josh covered his ears with his hands. You will apologize to the Princess Sarah, and then I shall send to hell forthwith, so that you may be judged for your sins. Please, God, no, Josh shouted. God will not save you from the Dark Lord Satan. But Sarah did save him. She reached up and gently tugged on Frank and Teddy's paw and said, It's okay, Frank and Teddy. He's not worth our time. Let's just let him go. Frank and Teddy dropped Josh into a sobbing heap, and Josh wasted no time in dashing out of the park as fast as his feet could carry him, while Frank and Teddy called after him. The judgment in hell is not so lenient. Sarah stared down at the dead butterflies, and Miss Hatchetface covered her mouth. There is no greater honor than to die in battle, Frank and Teddy said. Yeah, I guess so, Sarah replied, sounding unconvinced. I believe that I have detected insincerity in your voice. Allow me to rectify the situation. Frank and Teddy bent down and picked the dead butterflies up in his hands, and a cloud of dark smoke swirled around them. And then, miraculously, they began to fly.
Wow, Frank and Teddy, Sarah squealed. You brought them back to life.
I have merely endowed them with the power of Satan, he replied. As I watched Sarah and Frank and Teddy playing with the newly revived butterflies, I realized that I'd been wrong to judge Teddy based on the way he looked. I realized that he wasn't bad at all. I realized that he could just be what this family needed. That is, until the butterflies started breathing fire. Fire-breathing flies of butter. It does seem like Dan is having quite a memorable Christmas this year. If you've just joined us and would like to hear how exactly Dan got himself into this situation, the links to the previous parts of this story is in the description below. If you haven't done so already, do hit that subscribe button along with that bell icon to make sure you get updated on new videos that I post. And for those of you who would like to follow me on social media, I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/LadyMcCreepster. The direct link for that is also in the description. That's all I have for you this time, my dears. But don't leave for too long. Come back and visit me soon.